The Statue of Equality gets final touches. Work is going on pace of the 216 feet tall statue of the 11th century reformer and Vaishnavite saint Sri Ramanujan to be unveiled by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the sprawling 40-acre ashram of Sri Tridandi Chinna Jeeraswamy in Muchintal on the outskirts of Hyderabad on February 5. The Statue of Equality, as it is called, being installed to mark the 1000th birth anniversary of Sri Ramanuja. It was built of Panchaloha, a combination of gold, silver, copper, brass and zinc by the Aero Sun Corporation in China and shipped to India. It is the second largest in the world in sitting position of a saint. The monument will be surrounded by 108 Divya Desams of Sri Vaishnavite tradition, that is model temples like Tirumala, Srirangam, Kanchi, Ahobhilam, Badrinath, Muktinath, Ayodhya, Brindavan and Kumbakonam and others. The idols of deities and structures were constructed in the shape of at the existing temples. The base building, which is 16.5 meters tall, has a meditation hall where a 54-inch statue of Sri Ramanuja made of 120 kg gold representing the years he lived will be inaugurated by President Ramnath Kovind by performing the first puja on February 13. The deity at the inner sanctorum is meant for daily worship by the people. A laser show is planned. The beautification work at Sri Ram Nagar, where the ashram is located, are in full swing. A 45 feet tall dynamic water fountain in front of the statue is being painted in myriad hues. Work on the fountain, laser show, modern lighting and sound system are nearing the completion. INSACOG. What is INSACOG? INSACOG, Indian SARS-CoV-2 Consortium of Genomics, or Indian SARS-CoV-2 Genetics Consortium, is a forum set up under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare by the Government of India on 25th December 2020 to study and monitor genome sequencing virus variation of circulating strains of COVID in India. Initially, it was tasked to study the virus lineage B1.1.17 earlier found in United Kingdom in December 20. INSACOG works as a consortium of 28 national laboratories for genome sequencing located in different parts of India. All these 10 laboratories are required to share 5% of positive samples to INSACOG for further research and studies. A National Center for Disease Control (NCDC) nodal unit maintain the database of all samples of the new variants. Two national genomic sequence database centers are appointed: National Institute of Biomedical Genomics and CSIR Institute of Genomic and Integrative Biology. In its early research, INSACOG identifies virus variant referred to as double mutant variant. Elephant corridors to be restored in South Bengal. The fragmented and patchy forests of South Bengal have emerged as one of the hotspots of human-elephant conflict in the country, resulting in loss of lives of both the humans and the pachyderm, that is elephants. At times, the conflict results in law and order problems. In November 2021, a herd of 50 elephants came within 5 km east of Burdwan town, prompting the district administration to impose prohibitory orders in several gram panchayats in the region. Between 2014 and 2019, as many as 2,381 human deaths were recorded in elephant attacks across the country, of which 403 were reported from the West Bengal. The state, however, is home to less than 3% of elephant population and records a high death count of elephants in conflicts. Minimizing elephant-human conflict is the pressing need of the region, and wildlife organizations and experts have now taken up the task of undertaking ecological restoration of elephant corridors in South Bengal. Degradation of forest. The degradation started not just with increased agricultural activities in the region but also participatory joint forest management such as community forestry, which changed the very nature of forest to make it commercially viable, not considering the biodiversity of the region. An ecologist from Uttarayan Wildlife who is leading the 5-store restoration project. It also aimed at creating a balanced ecosystem so that humans and animals can coexist in consonance with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 180 to 200 elephants in the region, but due to fragmentation of forests, these herds are no longer following the traditional migration. A proposal for the Indian Environmental Services. The Subramaniam Committee was set up in August 2014 to review the country's green laws. and the procedures followed by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, MOEF and CC. It suggests that several amendments to align the then government's economic development agenda, but a parliamentary standing committee rejected the report on the grounds that it diluted key aspects of environmental legislation. The report proposed an Environmental Laws Management Act under which two expert bodies, the National Environment Management Authority NEMA and the State Environmental Management Authority SEMA, will be constituted at the central and state levels to evaluate project clearance in a time-bound manner. It also proposed a National Environment Research Institute and an Indian Environment Services to recruit qualified human resource in the environment sector. The Supreme Court, responding to a petition filed by lawyer Samar Vijay Singh, has asked the centre if it is planning to constitute an IES. What is TSR Subramaniam Committee Report on Environment? The Subramaniam Committee was set up in August 2014 to review the country's green laws and procedures followed by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. He suggested several amendments to align the government's economic development agenda. The report submitted to then Union Environment Minister Prakash Javadekar had suggested amendments to almost all green laws, including those relating to environment, forest, wildlife and coastal zone clearance. The committee had 3 months to submit its report. After it did, the Parliamentary Standing Committee rejected the report on the grounds that it ended up diluting key aspects of environmental legislation designed to protect the environment. The committee suggested that another committee with more expertise and time be constituted to review the environmental laws. What did the TSR report recommend? The report proposed an Environmental Laws Management Act (ELMA) and envisioned full-time expert bodies, National Environmental Management Authority and State Environmental Management Authority (SEMA), to be constituted at the central and state levels respectively to evaluate project clearance using technology and expertise in a time-bound manner, providing for single window clearance. To accelerate the environmental decision-making process, they suggested a fast-track procedure for linear projects, that is, the roads, railways and transmission lines, power and mining projects and projects of national importance. The Air Act and Water Act is to be subsumed within the Environmental Protection Act. The existing Central Pollution Control Board and State Pollution Control Board, which monitor and regulate the conditions imposed on industries to safeguard environment, are proposed to be integrated into NEMA and SEMA once the new bodies comes into existence. It also suggested an appellate mechanism against the decision of NEMA, SEMA or Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in respect to project clearance, prescribing a 3-month deadline to dispose the appeals. The report also recommended that environment reconstruction cost should be assessed for each product on the basis of damage caused by it to environment, and this should be added into the cost of project. This cost has to be recovered as a cess or duty from the project proponent during the life of the project. At the tail end, it proposed a National Environment Research Institute on the lines of Indian Council of Forest Research and Education to bring an application of high-end technology in environmental governance, and finally an Indian Environment Service to recruit qualified and skilled human resource in the environment sector. Has the report been accepted by the government? The centre never formally accepted this report and neither constituted a new committee as recommended by Parliament Standing Committee. However, many of these recommendations are implicitly making their way into the process of environment regulation. The government has proposed rewrites to the forest conservation law and set timelines to pace at which the expert committee that appraise the suitability of infrastructure project must proceed, as well as sought to make existing laws consonant with court judgments. How did the subject of IES come to the fore? The Supreme Court was responding to a petition filed by lawyer Samar Vijay Singh, whose counsel pointed out that the matters of environment required special expertise. Currently, the matters of environment regulation rests on scientists of Ministry of Environment and Forest as well as bureaucrats from the Indian Administrative Services. The apex court expressed reluctance at getting into administrative matters of the government, but nevertheless asked the centre if it expects to go about consulting such a mechanism. Two laws determine the custody of children in India. The first is the Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act (HMGA) of 1956, and the second is Guardian and Wards Act of 1890, GWA. So HMGA and GWA, all custody laws are founded on the best interest of the child, which is a concept incorporated from the UNCRC in the Juvenile Justice, Care and Protection of Children Act 2015. The best interest of child means to ensure fulfillment of his basic rights and needs, identity, social well-being, physical, emotional and intellectual development. The report in 2015 on reforms in guardianship and custody laws in India recommended joint custody and shared parenting. In 2016, a draft bill was recommended for protecting the best interests of the child, titled The Protection of Children, Inter-Country Removal and Attention Bill. What does the law say? Two laws determine the custody of children. The first is the Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act of 1956, which states that natural guardian of a Hindu minor boy or unmarried girl shall be the father and mother, provided the custody of minor who has not completed 5 years of age shall ordinarily with the mother. But the HMG does not contain any independent legal or procedural mechanism for deciding the custody right or declaring court-appointed guardians. Therefore, we fall back on the second law, which is colonial in nature. This is the Guardian and Wards Act of 1890, GWA. This deals with appointment of a person as guardian to child, both with respect to child and property. Child custody, guardianship and visitation issues between parents are determined under GWA if a natural parent wants to be declared an exclusive guardian to his/her own child. Upon disputes between parents in a petition under GWA, read with HMGA, guardianship and custody can be vested with one parent with visitation right to the other parent. In doing so, the welfare of the minor or the best interests of child shall be of paramount consideration. Now, what does the best interest of child mean? India is a signatory to the United Nations Convention on Rights of Child, UNCRC. The definition of best interest of child has been incorporated from the UNCRC in the Juvenile Justice, Care and Protection of Children Act 2015. The best interest of child means the basis for any decision taken regarding the child to ensure fulfillment of the basic rights and needs, identity, social well-being, physical, emotional and intellectual development, and is paramount in any custody battle. In 2019, the Supreme Court of India held in Lahari Sakamuri and versus Shoban Kodali that the best interest of child is wide in its connotation and cannot remain the love and care of the primary care. The mother in case of an infant or the child who is only a few years old. This is a child-centric approach. Again in 2022, the Supreme Court in Vasudha Sethi versus Kiran V. Bhaskar held that a child's welfare, not the individual or personal legal right of the parent, is of paramount concern in custody battle. Welfare of the child must get precedence over the parent's right. Recommendations have been made for joint parenting by various communities. The Law Commission of India report in 2015 on reforms in guardianship and custody law in India recommended joint custody and shared parenting. It disagreed with the idea of singular child custody with one parent. It made exhaustive recommendation for amendments in HMGA and GWA for joint custody and for guidelines for such custody, child support and visitation arrangement. Report 263 of the Law Commission of India titled Protection of Child, Inter-Country Removal and Attention Bill 2016 recommended a draft bill for protecting the best interest of child relating to custody as per UNCRC. The report of Justice Bindal Committee submitted by the government in 2018 also said the best interests of child are of paramount importance in the matters relating to child custody in the view of UNCRC. A complete draft of the protection of child defining wrongful removal and detention with a complete mechanism for redress was given in the 2-volume report to the Government of India. Peru declares environmental emergency following oil spill. Peru declared an environmental emergency Saturday to battle an oil spill caused by freak waves from a volcanic eruption in the South Pacific. The stunningly powerful eruption on last Saturday of an undersea volcano near Tonga unleashed tsunami waves around the Pacific and as far away as the United States. In Peru, the oil spill near Lima has fouled beaches, killed birds and harmed the fishing and tourism industries. With its 90-day decree, the government said it plans sustainable management of 21 beaches tarred by 6,000 barrels of oil that spilled from a tanker ship unloading at a refinery last Saturday. One aim of the decree is to better organize the various agencies and teams working in the aftermath of disaster, the Environment Ministry said. $50 million losses. Foreign Trade and Tourism Minister Roberto Sanchez estimated on Saturday that economic losses total more than $50 million, all sectors combined. The government is demanding payment of damages from the Spanish energy giant Repsol, which owns the refinery. The Environment Minister said 174 hectares, equivalent to 270 football fields of sea, beaches and natural reserves were affected by the spill. Crews have been working for days to clean up the spill, but the ministry said it issued the emergency decree because the crude still in the water was still spreading, reaching 40 kilometers from the spot of original spill. The spill amounts to a sudden event of significant impact on the coastal marine ecosystem. A chance to support growth and fiscal consolidation. The National Statistical Office released the first advanced national account estimate for 21-22 on January 7, 2022. India's real GDP growth in 21-22 is estimated at 9.2%, that is 30 basis points lower than the projection by Reserve Bank of India and the International Monetary Fund, projection of 9.5%. In an earlier analysis, we had considered some of the ongoing challenges to the 21-22 growth forecast, indicating a possible decline. The adverse effect of third wave of COVID-19, which is mainly affecting the last quarter of 21-22, may call for a further downward adjustment in the growth rate to about 9%. The main sectors that have held back are more robust recovery are trade, transport on the output side, and private final consumption expenditure on the demand side, as their annual estimated 21-22 magnitude remain below the corresponding levels in 19-20. Growth prospects. With respect to prospect of 22-23 growth, IMF and Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development OECD forecasts have indicated growth rate at 8.5% and 8.1% respectively. However, these may prove to be optimistic as the base effects characteristic 21-22 may be limited. In fact, as per the NSO's advanced estimates, at the end of 21-22, the magnitude of GDP in real terms is estimated at INR 147.5 lakh crore, that is only a shade higher than the INR 145.7 lakh crore in 1920. Thus, due to 3 waves of COVID-19 that India has experienced, 2 years of real growth in economic activities have been wiped out. The economy has to now start on a clean slate. Growth in 22-23 would depend on the basic determinants such as saving and investment rate in the economy. As per the advanced estimates, the gross fixed capital formation GFCF relative to GDP at the current prices stand at 29.6% in 21-22. Capacity utilization of India continues to have considerable slack. Available quarterly data indicate a capacity utilization ratio of only 60% and at the end of first quarter of 21-22 and an average of 61.7% in the preceding 4 quarters. As such, a pickup in private investment may take some time. Private final consumption expenditure, that is PFCE, also shows a low growth of 6.9% in 21-22. Any pickup in demand would continue to be constrained by low income growth in sectors characterized by high marginal propensity to consume, that is MPC, such as trade, transport sector and the micro, small and medium enterprises MSME sector more broadly. Growth in 22-23 would also continue to be constrained by supply side bottlenecks and high prices of global crude and primary products. It may thus be prudent to expect a real GDP growth in the range of 6 to 7%. The implicit price deflator IPD based inflation, which was as high as 7.7% in 21-22, may come down to about 5 to 6%. Thus, we may expect a nominal GDP growth of about 12 to 13% in 22-23. It is in the nominal magnitude which is crucial as far as budget is concerned. It was due to the high IPD based inflation that the nominal GDP growth in 21-22 at 17.6% exceeded real GDP growth by a margin of 8.4% point. This high nominal growth combined with base effects resulted in central center's gross tax return GTR growth of 50.3% during the first 8 months of the current fiscal year. In the first 6 months of 21-22, this growth was even higher at 64.2%. In October and November 21-21, the average growth in center's GTR, that is gross tax revenue, fell to about 17.4% as the base effect was weakening. We assess that the annual growth in the center GTR may be close to 35%, implying a buoyancy of nearly 2. With these buoyant tax revenues, the government may be able to limit the 21-22 fiscal deficit to its budgeted level of 6.8% of GDP, although a marginal slippage may not be ruled out. There may be some slippage in disinvestment targets, and supplementary expenditure demands have also to be accommodated. Going forwards, in the base effect in center's GTR would have weakened, we may expect a lower annual GTR growth of about 15 to 16% in 22-23, which in a combination with a nominal GDP growth of 13% implies a buoyancy of 1.2. This would still compare well with the center's GTR growth performance in the pre-COVID-19 years, which is averaged only 5.6% during 2017-2018 to 2019-2020. The major corporate income tax (CIT) reform undertaken in 2019-20 had provided, among other things, a concessional CIT rate of 15% for fresh investment in the manufacturing by domestic companies, provided their production took off on or before March 31, 2023. As nearly 2 years have been lost due to COVID-19, the government may consider extending the time limit for availing this benefit. The GST compensation provision would also come to an end in June 2022. This would cause a major revenue shock, at least for some states such as Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Andhra Pradesh. While this matter may be considered by the GST Council, the compensation arrangement should be extended by 2 years in some modified form. Its impact on center's budget should be provided for. With respect to non-tax receipts, the scope of the National Monetization Pipeline (NMP) may be extended to cover monetization of government-owned and assets. Disinvestment initiative may have to be accelerated. Now coming to expenditure priorities. Expenditure prioritization in 22-23 should focus on reviving both consumption and investment demand. The National Infrastructure Pipeline (NIP) should be reassessed, and its path may be recast in order to make up for existing deficiency in relation to its original targets, particularly in the health sector. In this regard, the infrastructure investment undertaken by the state governments and the public sector should be realistically ascertained, and shortfall with respect to original targets may be identified and the remedial measures initiated. Since the consumption demand remains weak, some fiscal support in the form of an urban counterpart to Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act may be considered, in addition to supporting some of the sectors which are directly impacted by the COVID-19. Revival of the economy in 22-23 would critically depend on containing the adverse economic impact of the third wave of COVID-19 and subsequent waves to a minimum. Now return to fiscal consolidation. It would be appropriate now to consider a graduated return to fiscal consolidation while using fiscal policy to lay the base for faster growth in years to come. The 15th Finance Commission had suggested a fiscal consolidation path where the center's fiscal deficit was benchmarked at 5.5% of GDP for 22-23. In their pessimistic scenario, it was kept at 6% of GDP. At this point, while supporting growth is critical, signaling a return to fiscal consolidation is also important. It may be prudent to limit the reduction in fiscal deficit GDP ratio to about 1% of the GDP in 22-23. This would imply a fiscal deficit in the range of 5.5 to 6% of the GDP. From here, a stepwise reduction of 0.5 percent points per year would enable a level of about 4% of GDP by 25-26. By this time, as suggested by 15th Finance Commission, a high-powered intergovernmental group should be considered to re-examine the sustainability patterns of debt and fiscal deficit of the central and state government in the light of new empirical realities, particularly taking into account the likely level of interest rate on the government debt.